Hey there, and welcome to the Shadow Network. Yeah, it occurred to me that you get your news from somewhere, and as you know, I believe that only reading books makes you well informed, because if you get your news from newspaper, radio, or television, that basically you're getting something filtered or pre-digested, and you're not getting an ample sort of view on things. So, yeah, that's like eating Twinkies. So, I like to read books that I don't like, because I think it's only fair to give people a chance to show or kind of expound their viewpoint. I picked up this book by Bill O'Reilly called Pinheads and Patriots, and because I was up for a book I didn't like, I got a very bad impression of Bill O'Reilly because of an interview he did with Ron Paul. And I think that Ron Paul is a statesman. I think that he is well studied, he's well read, he's consistent, and I would dare say has integrity and honesty. And I don't think Bill O'Reilly gave him his props in our town. So, but you know, maybe I've misjudged. So I picked up this book, and with an open mind, I went in and said, maybe I got it wrong. And but invariably when I read something, it gives me new ideas. Like I go, aha, and I get like this, like the glass shatters, and I get this great new perspective. And from this book, I actually got a few of them. First off, basically what this is he goes through and basically judges who's a pinhead and who's a patriot. But throughout the book, he never really defines in one, you know, you'd think in the opening of the book that he would say, well, this is what I mean by pinhead, this is what I mean by patriot. But it's really scattered throughout the book. And I made careful notes on that with page number references. So here it is. Pinhead. A pinhead is somebody who damages other people by their actions, is clueless even in a position of oversight, won't admit responsibility, drives people away from worthy books through biased remarks, hurts family and those who admire him, abuse of power, apathy towards suffering of others, greed, exploitation of powerless, that they pervert the intent of the law. Fair enough? Yeah, I'm in the middle. You can come get your stuff though if you want. That'd be okay. A patriot, no complaining, has an amazing story. Warmth, kindness, discipline, and grace. Public dissent is a mark of a patriot, according to Mr. O'Reilly. Public service, accomplishments, and overcoming obstacles. So I actually thought that was pretty neat. So I just want to highlight a few points, and if you can handle it, this is going to be about a half hour. If you can handle it, I'll make comments on those. First off, and basically, let me get to my big revelation with this book, which is this idea of a war on terror. And recently, as you know, there was a bill passed called the National Defense Authorization Act, which, if I understand things right, is a bill that funds the military. But of course, since this is a bill that, you know, there's like political consequences to voting against it, that's where you find what would otherwise, if it was a standalone piece of legislation, you find odious sections of that, and one of them effectively allows for the military to pick up United States citizens and hold them indefinitely with no counsel or a trial. So, but again, I have to admit, I haven't actually gone and read the legislation. So on that count, I'm getting my news secondhand. The only thing I'd say for myself is that I get it from various sources. So anyway, so basically, the big insight I got from this book, and this doesn't come from Bill O'Reilly, it just comes from like, oh, okay, what about that? It's, Bill wants to get the bad guys, and bad guys don't deserve niceties like a lawyer or a trial. And that's when it hit me. How do you know they're bad guys? That's what our justice system is all about. Is if someone has an accusation against you, be it a private citizen, state government, or the federal government, then bring the charges. Let them be heard. Round up 12 men good and true of my own neighborhood, and let us hear facts of both sides, and let there be a lawyer and a certain, I believe it's called due process. So, and that was the other thing that occurred to me. Aha! But supposedly we're supposed to suspend that concept because they're bad guys. Well, first off, how can you know? And secondly, if somebody does know, and I'm presuming it's in the military somewhere, that there are people apparently who are so wise and so informed and know the truth of the matter so well that they can dispense with all of those things. And I was like, we need to round these guys up. We need to get these guys into the civil courts too. Then we could just dispense with lawyers, judges, due process, and just move right to punishment and execution if we have people that are so wise. But the fact is, we don't have people that are so wise. No human can be trusted with that kind of power. It's absolutely terrifying. Let us continue. So here's quotes. So I haven't given Bill O'Reilly a chance to talk. Now I guess he knows how his guests feel. We are a nation that makes value judgments and demands that the bad guys pay a price. Hassan is a terrorist, and that's that. Most Americans reject nuance when dealing with mass murderers, and they don't give a fig about political correctness. Unquote. So there you have it. Americans just want judgment, and like, who's Hassan? How do you know that he's a terrorist? Accused of gunning down 13 people in Fort Hood, Texas, appears at a pretrial hearing. Well, at least he got a trial, right? So there's that. And the president, this is another quote, and the president turns around and tells surviving family members that Al-Qaeda members captured overseas are entitled to U.S. constitutional protections. What a foolish, foolish decision. I really can't comment on that. And maybe he's right. This is something I really need to study a lot further. Because then you're talking about foreigners, basically. But it did occur to me that, well, again, if somebody's done something wrong, and you believe they've done something wrong, whatever it is, then bring your case. If there's evidence, because otherwise, how do you know you don't have the wrong person? How do you know that there's not been a mistake made? I mean, if your case is so strong, and so strong that you're ready to just whoosh, let the guillotine fall, then why can't it withstand a certain level of scrutiny? Let's see. This is a quote from a transcript. Lindsey Graham, can you give me one case in United States history where an enemy combatant caught on the battlefield was tried in civilian court? Eric Holder, I don't know. I'd have to look into that. You know the determination. Lindsey Graham, we're making history here, Mr. Attorney General. I'll answer it for you. The answer is none. So there you go. Again, I have to admit I'm out of my depth here because I've only have passing familiarity with how all of this works. President Obama is a loner, a man who lives deep within himself. While many of us feel the pain of others around us, the president is more of a technician, a man slow to respond outwardly to any emotion. It would not be fair to say he doesn't identify with others, but his public persona is definitely detached. Let's keep going. By the way, I made a lot of notes about body scanners. Bill O'Reilly seems to not think that much about privacy. That's okay to scan, give people whole body scans. Now here's an interesting one. As you'll remember, the story. This is the the underwear bomber. This is in Christmas 2009. This is what Bill O'Reilly has to say. As you'll remember, the story was enormous. Despite billions spent on national security, a 23-year-old loon trained in Yemen almost murdered 300 people on a plane. It took President Obama 3 days to respond publicly, and when he did, he called the terrorist guy an isolated extremist. Not good enough. Okay, so I guess the critical thinker in me thinks, well, isn't it an isolated incident? It's not like it's. What if it were 50 incidents a month? Now that would be a lot. If it's one incident a year, that's probably isolated. I don't know the exact numbers, but I think it's something like 17,000 people a year are killed in drunk driving accidents. Well, it seems if you're worried about life and limb, seems like alcohol is probably, or drunk drivers are more of a threat to public safety than terrorists. But again, back to the quotation here. The critical thinker in me was thinking, Bill O'Reilly has, facts. He says that there were billions spent on national security. Nevertheless, this guy got through, right? But then he says the president was a failure. That's his conclusion. And this is a typical thing in politics, that it's like, the last 3 years have been horrible. And it's like they can only see back 36 months. And I'm just like, I don't know if the national debt's been going up for a long time. Our monetary policy has been the same for a long time. Our foreign policy has been the same for a long time. And, but not the policy. It's not, well, maybe we misspent that money. That's not the conclusion. Other interesting points? We're only about 25% the way through. I'm all dog-eared. Unfortunately, meaningful security requires money, although the harsh truth is that you can never be fully protected. Bing! That statement is actually consistent with what Ron Paul says. What I believe personally is that U.S. intervention, U.S. foreign policy, which is effectively imperialism. Let me finesse that just a little bit, or clarify, I should say. U.S. foreign policy is, now that we have the upper hand, we should keep all other countries and entities back on their heels and never let anybody amass a certain amount of power. And I believe that is not a good long-term policy for safety. It's great for transferring public wealth to the private sector. Naomi Klein really gets into that in her book, The Shock Doctrine, which is fantastic. The man in the middle. The individual American appears to be rapidly losing power. That's true. President Obama and his team want to pass laws that put even more power and money in the hands of the federal government. That, very simply, is my primary beef with them. So that's something Bill O'Reilly and I have in common. We object to the consolidation of power in a central government. So I'd say good for him. But on Marketplace, he's talking about the healthcare thing. Back to Bill O'Reilly. And I hope you can tell when I'm quoting from the book and when I'm speaking of my own account. Quote, "But a marketplace solution is not what progressive Americans really want. Misleading political rhetoric aside, their vision is for the feds to control healthcare and pretty much every other industry. In that way, Washington can impose the big liberal tenet of economic justice on our country." So, point of agreement there. That's interesting. Bill O'Reilly doesn't like gadgets. But he doesn't condemn it either. He says, it's not here, but he says, if Twitter is what you like, then, quote, "tweet hardy, my friend." So good for him. Found out Bill O'Reilly's an independent. So don't go looking for him running for Republican office, I guess. And a member of the AARP. I think he's in his 60s. Not sure. He says the old-time methods of public discourse are pretty much a thing of the past. All right, I'm going to start and stop here. Oh, this video is going to be long. All right. Well, I'm glad to be your radio. Here is a cute quote. "But back to you, the person who is reading this book. My God, how quaint is that? You're holding an actual book and turning its pages. Relish the experience. It won't be long before that and many other things we have taken for granted become extinct too." So that's the important thing. Don't just judge somebody. Don't just, if you have a bad first impression, sometimes you gotta go, or if you hear something bad about someone, go to the source. Find out what it is. I was reading on InfoWars about like the FBI putting out these bulletins saying these could be terrorist, things that are suspicious, and they were like everyday things. Someone's buying too much food, but I actually went in and read them all, and some of them did make sense. So there's that. Of course, my whole thing is give me liberty or give me death. That statement, if true, if you believe in that, it means I prefer liberty over personal safety. And that's my choice as a citizen. I'm coming forth using my First Amendment rights to you to support policies in government that promote individual liberties. And that should not be a stretch for Americans. It's in the Bill of Rights. And right now, people should be worried about the Bill of Rights. All right, Rise of Machines. Here it is. So here's the thesis. It's not that page. Here we go. And this is where I was like, okay, because if you crack a book, never mind multiple books, never mind, like Ron Paul, I've read The Revolution at least 3 times, In the Fed at least 2 times, and I read Foreign Policy of Freedom once. Plus, I took a lot of notes on it. Haven't read Liberty Defined. Haven't been able to find it. I'm hoping that's because it's sold out. And quite frankly, I think I know the man now. And so, anyway, yeah, you got to crack a book. It's about American exceptionalism. And so this is sort of a core thing, is this idea that, centralization of government power and use of that power is bad when it's used domestically, but is good when it's used abroad. And that is the sort of I'm looking for, inconsistency that I see in Bill O'Reilly's thinking. That somehow we don't have the wisdom to interfere in healthcare, but we do have the wisdom to interfere in another country. And that wasn't because I went through it. I've actually read this book almost twice now. I read it when I first got it, like really quick, just kind of skipping around, whatever looked interesting to me. It's usually how I attack it. And that's what hit me, the tenor of the book. I was like, where have I heard this before? It was Audacity of Hope. Barack Obama's book sounds in some places, like Bill O'Reilly's book. It's, we should wear the one ring. We should use this ring of power. We could use it for good. It won't corrupt us. And Barack Obama talks about American exceptionalism, and it should be used domestically to kind of run things. And Bill O'Reilly believes in American exceptionalism abroad. But let me just read the quotes. Maybe I have misinterpreted. Can you imagine the newly elected Ron Reagan going to Cairo and telling the Muslim world that the USA had exploited them in the past? Can you imagine that? Even though America has exploited the Arab world at times, it has also greatly helped those politically challenged nations. Reagan would have trumpeted our largesse and avoided the mea culpas. This gets better. And this is what you, the viewer, guy, don't trust me. I'm telling you, don't trust the news networks necessarily. So why would you trust my regurgitations and interpretations? If you understand America, you know that most Americans sincerely believe that their country is a force for good in the world. Oh, that is fantastic. Sincerely believe that their country is a force for good in the world. Wow. We must be wise to be able to use this power for the right thing. That was a little bit of sarcasm. Let me state it sincerely then. I don't believe that. I believe that no man is wise enough or good enough or just enough to run another man's life, even partially. The best you can hope for, proper role of government, is to make sure that one man doesn't hurt another man. Anyway, if I may continue, quote, and you know what that is? It is. And you know what? It is a force for good in the world. I've seen it time and again. For all his unilateral bluster, President Bush saved millions of lives in Africa by financing a number of AIDS and malaria projects. Because of the tens of millions of dollars he spent on those programs, compliments of the American taxpayer, many human beings are alive today. That's just one small example of what the USA routinely practices all around the world. Whenever disaster hits, we as individuals and as a nation are the most generous responders. Just ask the Haitians. Do you see it? Unquote. Do you see it? The critical thinker in me thinks, okay, first off, you took from the American taxpayer. So in a way, you took lives. You took away someone's time, their labor, their energy that they're never going to get back to benefit some other group. Ron Paul made a very interesting statement. Somebody asked him, well, you know, things are going to heck in X country. What would you as president do about that? And he said, I don't represent the people of that country. I represent the American people. That's right. That is right. How can it be right to take someone else's life, their money, their livelihood, and give it to someone else? Now, hold on a second. That's by force. I'm all for this. Those AIDS and malaria projects, they could have been done voluntarily. I'm with Bill O'Reilly, except with the force issue. That I don't believe the United States central government is the best method to accomplish these things. I believe that Americans are noble of spirit, a wonderful, generous people who appreciate their liberties. That's my perspective. But I stop that short at saying, okay, take money from these people by force and give it to these other people. So, and that's a false choice you routinely see on political programs. Well, you just want those people to die. In fact, I saw, because I went back to kind of try and watch the O'Reilly show. Unfortunately, on YouTube, it's mostly negative stuff. So I kind of sifted through that and tried to find just, you know, unvarnished clips. And it's that he, what is it? Oh, believes in torture. Yeah, so anyway, let's continue. I'm sorry, lost my train of thought. It'll come back. Quote, we are an overwhelmingly positive presence in this world because we have the money and power to impose justice and to finance charity. Portugal is a nice country. Can they do that? And if the United States does not right wrongs, who will? China? Russia? Uganda? That is, boom! There's your mindset. Oh, and in the previous thing, that's not conservative. To believe that taxation should be used for things that would traditionally be the purview of private charity. If you look on Republican platforms, and there's a lot. There's a lot of Republican parties, county level, state level, all over the country. In fact, there's at least 50. It's that they believe that, and by the way, don't get Republicanism and conservatism like mixed up necessarily. But anyway, it's not conservative. Private charity, that's a conservative principle. And so here you see something not conservative here, which is basically the use of a monolithic government entity to do good. So hold on a second. So I made some impose justice and finance charity. So I have some cross references here. Page 95, which is actually it was quite patriotic. Quote, actually it's quite patriotic in the great tradition of Massachusetts. I believe that most Americans, including many liberals, do not trust the federal government. I mean, we have to put up with it because that's our system, but do you really think the giant chaotic apparatus in Washington can bring success and happiness to your life? Anyone who believes that should travel to Havana, Cuba, and take a look around. So why is it that in foreign policy we should trust the government to do the right thing, but in domestic policy we should not trust the government to do the right thing? Page 121. I was like cross-referencing these things. By the way, this is going to be a very long video, but it's going to be worth it. Because I think Bill O'Reilly is, to some extent, representative of a certain type of mindset in the country. Okay, quote, so despite all the trouble in 1971, I still believe the USA was a noble nation, but there was no doubt in my mind that things were screwed up in Southeast Asia. Now, why did I cross-reference that? So that was young Bill O'Reilly. Here you go. Quote, therefore, the president wants to expand government power in order to provide folks with what they need: health care, fewer carbon fuels, and a more diverse economy that shares the wealth. In addition, Barack Obama is an internationalist, which means he believes America does not have an exceptional place in the world. He wants the United States to be humble on the international front, and if that means overemphasizing his country's mistakes, so be it. I disagree with that. I actually think that Barack Obama is he may be an internationalist, but as Bill O'Reilly says, but he's definitely an interventionist. Let's continue. I think I've covered the major things. Let me just see if I can. Oh, this kind of stuck in my head. Quote, I base my opinions on solid research and deliver my talking points memo with the authority of experience and knowledge. That was like, bing! Well, and maybe I'm, the only dummy who's finally seeing this, but yeah, there's talking points. They tell people what to say on the news. So, folks, look at me. Look. Think for yourself. Read a book. Get lots of different sources and perspectives and decide for yourself. Don't get lazy. Don't let someone else tell you what to think or believe. Oh, this is brilliant. So, quote, so I am not getting the arrogant deal. Oh, he doesn't understand why people call him arrogant. Seriously? Go watch the show sometime. Am I overbearing? Sometimes. Obnoxious? Of course. impatient with pinheads who don't answer direct questions all day long. Now we're back to my first impression, which was, I was looking for Ron Paul stuff, found an interview where Bill O'Reilly interviews Ron Paul, and I was like, he doesn't let the man answer a question. What he does, if he's not getting an answer he likes, he interrupts, and he starts chopping them up. And I was like, that is really obnoxious. But what he says is that those are just pinheads who won't answer direct questions. So there you go. So I'll leave that for you to decide. I'm going to put a link to the interview with Ron Paul. My question to you is, does he give him enough time to properly, albeit briefly, expound his ideas? I think that's something Ron Paul's got really good at recently, which is basically condensing his philosophy down to sound bite size. Here it is. Here are his rules of interviewing. Insist on the question being answered. Tell the truth always. Rule 3, interrupt. Quote, I simply cut people off if they wander or repeat themselves, unquote. Rule 4, admit you're wrong when you're actually wrong. Rule 5, don't be a phony, be genuine on the air. So, you know, maybe he believes that. The impression I get is that he's kind of like he's like Adam Sandler. Like, the appeal of the Adam Sandler movie is guys, he's doing things guys wish they could do but they can't do. You know, punch someone in the face. I mean, Adam Sandler in his movies. So, you know, of course you couldn't do that in real life. You'd be arrested for assault. You know, he gets the girl likes his stupid jokes, kind of a Jack Black thing. So I'm drawing a comparison there, only in this one sense, that not that Bill O'Reilly is like Adam Sandler. Listen carefully to me now, that Bill O'Reilly is like a character in an Adam Sandler movie, that he does things these armchair politicos wish they could do. That, you know, they could put those stupid young hippies in their place. Tell them to shut up. So, yeah, and I don't like that. You know, you can be strong, but you can also be polite to your guests. But see, I could be wrong, because I'm not a follower of this man's show. I've only maybe, you know, watched 10 or 20 bits from it. This is an extraordinary piece. Oh, now this is amazing. Boom! I gotta start and stop for this one. All right. In fact, I think I'm gonna make each one of these a section. Let's get out my phone. I can't believe it hasn't rung in like an hour. Is my ringer on? Yeah, it's on. Interesting. Let's turn that down to vibrate. Vibrato. Alright. So basically he classifies George Washington as a patriot. Go figure. But what's interesting is apparently the let's see, Horatio Gates, Washington's second in command, writes this letter saying, even though these British generals or British soldiers have abused the populace, quite horribly I might add, he says, he writes a letter saying that the colonial officers should not abuse captured British prisoners. So these were people that were clearly guilty of something, not suspected. They had a uniform on. It was common knowledge. And this is where it just, for me, it just gets weird. I'm like, how can Mr. O'Reilly make the comments I'm about to read to you, and yet say you should waterboard people if they're a suspect? It seems inconsistent. Quote, this is an extraordinary piece of history that clearly demonstrates a vital fact. The father of our country was a humane man, even in the face of intense provocation. As the Gates letter tells us, the British Redcoats, under the command of Thomas Gage, were brutal to the people who lived in and around Boston. Yet Washington went out of his way to establish strict humanitarian rules for those captured by his forces. At the time, that kind of order was extremely rare because feelings of revenge were running high on both sides. By his perspicacity, George Washington established the U.S. government as an entity that seeks justice and extends mercy. His actions defined the newly formed United States as a noble nation. His brilliant performance during the Revolutionary War and subsequent leadership as president set an example that all American politicians should seek to emulate. Too bad many of them don't. My admiration for George Washington is total. He is the gold standard as far as patriotism is concerned. Well, I have to say, I completely agree with that. Right now, I am not worried for my safety. I'm not worried about terrorists blowing me up. I'm worried about statues and monuments and books and music and literature that will enshrine the behavior of the United States for centuries to come. If we have acted nobly, if we have, dare I say, pursued a Christian approach to how we treat political prisoners, prisoners of war, even enemies that have intensely provoked us, that's the America that I believe in. That is the America that I want to see. And that's the America that I am already inside. That's what I want as a citizen. So I have to, giving a man his due is a wonderful thing, because you may just find something beautiful and good about this person. Bill O'Reilly wrote this. Something that profoundly touched me, something that expressed something inside of me that I agree with. It's beautiful. It was almost like poetry when I got to this. I was like, wow. Defined the newly formed United States as a noble nation. The U.S. government as an entity that seeks justice and extends mercy. Just absolutely amazing. Talks about the Trail of Tears. He says Andrew Jackson is a pinhead because he 4,000 Cherokees died on the Trail of Tears. And I'm just thinking, all right, well, what's the U.S. government doing now that's making people die? And is it more or less than 4,000 people? Policies. Our policies make people live or die. And I worry about it. I think we have a profound responsibility as citizens to elect the right and to be paying attention to what our government is doing. Paying very close attention. Oh my gosh. President Reagan spent freely on defense, a strategy that caused the Soviet Union to go bankrupt, or so some historians contend. Correctly, I think. I disagree. Bankrupting both countries. Insane. Alright, here you go. Ours is just going to happen a little later. Okay, let's see. No. I think that's it. So, still not a fan, but at least I did. I would hope that other people would do me the same courtesy. Heard something bad about me? Don't like me? Maybe you should have me over. Maybe we should go out to lunch. Maybe we should talk it out. I think this is that's a much needed sort of discourse for this country, because right now the biggest problems we have, they are things where there could be broad agreement. The Bill of Rights. Love me the Bill of Rights. if you don't mind, check this out. All the politicians pay lip service to it. But the fact is, a lot of them are doing things that go against it. This is it. Look at that. One little piece of paper. And for the first 10, not even 2. 12th Amendment is like a quarter of it. Just amazing what this gives you. Or, I guess, tells you that you already had as a God-given part of your nature. Yep. Here it is. In all criminal prosecutions, this is 6th Amendment rights. And in fact, this is the most important one, because if you don't have this one, you never have a chance to contend that your rights have been violated. In all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed, which district shall have been previously ascertained by law, and to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation, to be confronted with the witnesses against him, to have compulsory process for obtaining witnesses in his favor, and to have the assistance of counsel for his defense. That, folks, that is justice. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you got some inspiration, and that maybe, just maybe, you've got some insight and learned to see things in a different way.